Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining Child Care Aware of America's webinar, 2015 Year in Review. We will be walking initiatives and other happenings on the Hill from 2015. My name is Michelle McCready, and I'm the Deputy Chief of Policy at Child Care Aware of America, and I will be handing it over to Jay Nichols, who's the Director of Governmental Affairs. If you could identify the box on your screen, and if you have questions throughout the presentation, please don't hesitate to type them in the chat function, and we will do our best to answer the questions at the end of the webinar. And if we don't get to them, we'll absolutely follow up with you all individually. So again, thank you so much for joining, and take it away, Jay.
Well, thanks, Michelle, and good afternoon to everyone on the phone. Thanks again for joining us as we will use the next roughly the next 45 minutes to an hour just to review all the action on Capitol Hill, both from a federal budget standpoint as well as through an education reauthorization initiative. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to type a question into the chat box that you have on your screens. This is the first time Child Care Aware of America has done something like this. We've, with the reauthorization of the Child Care Development Block Grant, there's obviously been many webinars and presentations on not only its history of reauthorization, but also its ongoing implementation and all the needs that are required with that. So we've wanted to also use this opportunity to review everything that's happened on Capitol Hill, especially with regards to child care funding and to child care programs in general. Now, before I launch into, and we will do it in chronological order, before I begin the presentation, so many of you on the phone may not be that familiar with the actual appropriations process. You see there on the screen, by its regular order, by its definition, the President usually submits a request to Congress in early February. Congress then gets to work on what is called a Congressional Budget Resolution. The President of the United States doesn't sign it. It's it's a non-binding resolution, but it's used by both the House and the Senate to serve as a guide on spending limits and program prioritization. And then the House, under law, the House actually has to initiate the markup of budget bills first, and they usually spend a couple months, usually in the late spring to early summer, with a target date of around June 30th to complete all 12 of their appropriations bills. While the Senate moves a little bit slower, they tend to not really begin marking up and reviewing bills until the start of the summer. Many of their bills, to be honest with you, rarely make it to the floor, but if they do, it's usually not until the fall, and leaving very little time for reconciliation for any type of a House-Senate agreement that can reach the President's desk. And they're out all of August, usually on a 4 to 5 week recess, and before they know when they get back, the next fiscal year is about to begin. So as you can see on the screen, the yellow arrow at the bottom is supposed to be just a pretty straightforward, straight line process. However, as you will see here, it's actually very complicated, mostly because of just vast disagreements between not only Democrats and Republicans on priorities, but just the House and Senate in general. No matter what party affiliation, the House and Senate always tend to view different priorities and spending bills between each other. So the actual process was the President does submit a request to Congress in early February, but Congress doesn't actually complete a budget resolution when it's supposed to be mid-April. It's usually by early May. The House the House usually gets working on the bills in the same timeline, but they only maybe complete half of them. This past year, in 2015, the Senate only completed one of its 12 bills. And as you'll see, once we approach September 30th, there is no final budget, so what's called a continuing resolution has to be enacted, which they did until early December. Pardon me. And then, unfortunately, with an agreement not being not being available for quite some time, a number of other CRs had to be enacted before Congress in the 11th hour, just right before Christmas, was able to reach an agreement with the president on an omnibus spending bill, which the president signed in December 19th. So just wanted to do a quick review that while on paper an appropriations process seems pretty simple, it's very complicated. It can be a very complicated process that obviously requires not only continuously working with our members to ensure that child care priorities are included, but it's also it's constant follow-up, and many times it's out of our hands. It's usually quiet until leadership can reach an actual budget agreement. So with that, we will proceed with the actual presentation. And this past year was actually in the wake of the Child Care and Development Block Grant being reauthorized in late 2014. Overall, last year, 2015, was actually a pretty productive and encouraging year for child care priorities, as I will be explaining from here on out. And it began with the President's State of the Union last January, where he actually made child care a priority. Mentioned child care throughout his speech, as well as in specific regard with helping low-income families. This was before his budget was unveiled, but he did make public that he wanted to make a very strong investment in increasing mandatory funding for the CCDF, as well as tripling the child care tax credit to $3,000 per child, and trying to find ways to reach or better serve families that face obstacles to finding quality care. Excuse me. A couple weeks after the State of the Union, the President then published his fiscal year 2016 budget request to Congress. And obviously, you see at the top, the big one was he over the course of 10 years, he requested $82 billion in new mandatory CCDF funding. He did request a $266 million increase for CCDBG. That request was that $266 million was really intended to be spent on implementation needs for states as they work to get their 3-year plans, and as well as a number of other things done by this March, obviously. A significant increase in Head Start with almost half of the funds to be developed to expanding the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership Program. $15 billion for the home visiting program. Funding for what's called preschool development grants, and then at the bottom he provided more details on his child independent tax care credit for families, and while increasing that it should be made available to families with up to $120,000. So as expected, the President's budget was welcomed by some, but with Republicans in full control of Congress, it was not welcomed by many in leadership. Therefore, beginning in mid-March, both the House and the Senate proposed their budget resolutions. As you will see, the House and both chambers proposed massive cuts to discretionary programs over 10 years. The House about $1 trillion more than what the Senate wanted to propose. They wanted to take the SNAP program and cut it by $140 billion and turn it into a block grant. Obviously, another attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act of 2010, as well as significantly cutting Medicaid. But as you will see, and I highlight it on this slide, the budget resolution did not undo the sequester, which has really, for those, I think most of you on the phone, especially not only in child care, but anybody involved in any program that's supported with public money aimed to help low-income and at-risk families. The sequester has really harmed a lot of programs, and caused lots of folks to lose assistance in a number of areas, and not only hampered health care, but as well as education and nutrition programs. So not only it did not eliminate sequester, but it also did not raise the caps spending caps for new discretionary funding, which have been locked in place for quite some time. Now, it was basically these budget resolutions were pretty much they were passed on party line votes. They were then reconciled in early May. And again, the president never signs these, but he did make a public announcement that he was against the congressional resolutions, and therefore the House and Senate proceeded to use the resolutions as a markup. And when they began marking up the bills for the next fiscal year. However, before the fiscal year 16 appropriations process really got going, Congress there were a couple positive things before a very brutal spending fight. In mid-April, Congress actually passed what's called the Medicare Access and CHIP Reauthorization Act of 2015. Included in it was 2-year extensions of both the maternal, infant, early childhood visiting program and CHIP. As you can see, that for the McVie program, it's roughly $800 billion or $400 billion per year. And obviously, the extension of a CHIP is of critical importance because it assists nearly 8 million children. Shortly afterwards, the Senate, Congress has been trying to do this for the last several Congresses, but there has been an attempt to try to overhaul the No Child Left Behind law, and the Senate took a stab at it, and the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee unanimously approved the Every Child Achieves Act. It would, in the big picture, it would overhaul No Child Left Behind. It would redo. It would redefine many testing requirements, but I think for the purposes of this call, it did include a bipartisan amendment from Senators Patty Murray and Johnny Isakson that authorized a new early education grant to the states. So after a pretty depressing March, anticipating what we at Child Care Aware of America that we saw coming as far as a budget fight, there was actually April turned out to be a pretty pleasant, a very productive, and we're happy that Congress was able to get this done. Now we move slightly forward, and like I mentioned, when the House got going with their markups and they reached the Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education Spending Bill, it wasn't very pleasant. They proposed no new increase for CCDBG, and only include $150 million. The Senate only included $150 million in new funds, well short of what the president requested, and quite well short of what was really needed. Head Start only received modest increases, and I believe that this new funding it would have actually hampered designated funds for the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership Program. Both bills propose to eliminate the preschool development grants, as well as a number of other other health and education programs, most of them which don't have a federal authorization. And again, neither bill proposed new discretionary funding. So the increases for CCDBG and Head Start, they actually took money from other accounts to try to cover the cost of these increases. So they took money from another critical program to try to fund a critical child care program, and as opposed to what they should be doing, which is proposing new funding, especially for CCDBG, now that we have a new 5-6-year reauthorized bill. And the budget fight. So the budget fight, we're roughly at that point we were halfway through the year, a long ways to go. So before we we delve into the details of how the progress made, right around the middle of summer is when education reform became a hot topic. The House did pass their own version of a No Child Left Behind overhaul and reauthorization. However, it was, in short, it eliminated a lot of programs, consolidated a number of others. It was something that the White House would not even consider supporting, and as the moment it passed, President Obama issued a veto threat, and even the Senate, even there was a bipartisan response in the Senate that they thought that the House bill was too draconian. But there was a commitment. There was a commitment on both sides of the aisle, and at Congress and the White House to get education reform done before the end of 2015. Many of you also are aware that Secretary of Education Ari Duncan announced that he would be stepping down at the end of 2015. So it was in his interest, as well as many others, to try to get this finished. And so after the House version passed, there was kind of this feeling on Capitol Hill of how can you reconcile the Senate version, which the Senate version, which a very strong bipartisan showing passed, and try to compare to what could be kept or eliminated in the House version. And obviously, President Obama, he issued a veto threat to the House version, but he did not threaten to veto the Senate version, even though he did have some concerns. So for the better part of roughly 4 months, congressional aides, and we obviously at Child Care Aware of America, we met with many folks in the House and Senate, but basically congressional aides and House and Senate leadership met nonstop for several months and hammered out a compromise which was announced right before Thanksgiving, in which the House passed in early December, and which Congress actually approved in early December, and then the President signed shortly afterwards. And like I said, this is incredibly significant because I believe since 2007 there have been attempts in every Congress to try to reauthorize No Child Left Behind, and every effort always fell up short, usually considered very short. And by short, I mean, I don't even think there was not only a conference bill, but I don't even think the Senate it was even able to pass its version of No Child Left Behind overall until last year. So what is the highlight that we would like to go into detail with everyone, with all of you on the phone? Obviously, what the biggest news is that preschool development grants, which was targeted for elimination and in funding in initial markups of the 2016 spending bills, actually received the federal authorization of $250 million a year. For the last couple of years, the president proposed funding it, and he was able to get some money from Congress. But in the budget climate that we now live in, especially over the past 5 or 6 years, if you want to propose a new federal program, it is very important to try to get a long-standing authorization in a separate bill to go along with it, because they may be able to fund it in an appropriation bill for maybe 1 or 2 years, but then priorities change, and many of these programs, for example, Race to the Top never had a federal authorization, and that program's been done away with. But we were actually very pleased that preschool development grants were adopted. It was, from what we've heard from Senator Patty Murray's office and Senator Johnny Isakson of Georgia, that it was a very, very strong bipartisan. It was welcomed with bipartisan praise. This is obviously going to not only help the states assist low-income, at-risk, low-income and disadvantaged students, but also will help. It will help build partnerships with Head Start providers, and with the ongoing effort to give parents not only the most, but the best options available with regard to early education. And the bill also included the creation of a new grant program to support early learning literacy, clarifying language on Title I with regards to early learning, more support to Native American communities, and provide authorizations for promised neighborhoods and full-service community schools where early learning can be used as funding may be invested towards early learning initiatives. So this was a very, very this was great news. The bill is authorized through fiscal year 2020, and we are looking forward to working with states on using the critical funds to help build out early education services. So that was non-budget. That was our non-budget highlight. As Congress was working to finalize No Child Left Behind overhaul, a lot of things started. It was a quiet August. It was a quiet September, but then a lot of things started. A lot of parts started moving, and a lot of change came. Everyone is President Obama, in numerous public speeches throughout August, September, said he basically, he drew a line, and he just said that he would veto any spending bill, and that would include defense, if it didn't lift spending caps for new discretionary funding. And I can tell you guys, I can tell all of you that at this point, basically House and Senate leaders really weren't even speaking to each other except working on short-term CR. They really had no idea how they could come together and meet the needs of the White House while also adhering to some of their demands with regards to spending cuts. And then it really became a big question mark about a month later with the announcement that Speaker John Boehner was retiring. And what looked to be a pretty straightforward successor in Kevin McCarthy, who is the House Majority Leader, there were some folks in the caucus that didn't support his candidacy, and led to some turmoil, and it actually led to him withdrawing shortly after he announced. So for weeks, leaders turned to Congressman Paul Ryan of Wisconsin, at the time, obviously, former vice presidential candidate, and was the chair of the former chair of the House Budget Committee, and then currently the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, which oversees taxes in this country. After considerable lobbying, he announced his intent. He announced his intent to his bid for Speaker, and on October 22nd was elected shortly afterwards. And so John Boehner officially left on the 31st of October. We had a new Speaker, but we still didn't there was really no plan of how to try to finalize a budget deal. Well, with President Obama and the new Speaker, along with Majority Leader McConnell and Minority Leader Harry Reid, shortly after Speaker Ryan took office, there was a budget deal that was agreed to that would provide $80 billion in new non-defense spending for fiscal year 2016 and 2017. In addition to that, there was late last year, there was a date roughly around Thanksgiving is when they thought there would have to be a vote in the debt ceiling again. But this budget deal basically suspended any vote on a debt limit ceiling until March of 2017. So basically the next Congress and the new administration. So with this relatively surprising budget deal, it did most importantly help pave the way for a final spending bill. And so for the better part of Thanksgiving to early December, while congressional aides are very quiet on what was going to be included in the deal, I think that they felt that they maybe had a very, very small needle to thread, and perhaps not being very providing all the details at once because they wanted to get a bill done, and they obviously all wanted to go home. But on December 15th, an Omnibus Appropriations Bill deal was announced by both President Obama and Speaker Ryan. And, of course, the good news is what we highlight here. President Obama basically got his $2.8 billion request with specific language including there, which, as you see, some funds must be dedicated for improving the quality of care for infants and toddlers. They met him roughly halfway on his Head Start request. It's still very, very good. Probably about, remember the House and the Senate proposed something like $150 million increase, whereas in the final bill they got roughly a $700 million increase, and with $635 million reserved for early Head Start child care partnerships. And of course, now that the Every Student Succeeds Act is now law, and Preschool Development Grants has its authorization, that program did get its $250 million appropriation. In addition to that, the Congress also passed a very, very large tax extender package, which actually made permanent the refundable credits through the Child Tax Care and Earned Income Tax Credit programs. The authorization for both of those tax programs were actually going to expire in 2017. So obviously it was very important to get this done to address it sooner rather than later. So Shortly after it was announced, the bill pretty much it sailed through passage through Congress, very strong bipartisan votes, and President Obama signed the bill into law on December 18th. So as you can see, the year started. It was a little bit of a rough start. It looked it looked a little gloomy about trying to get significant new investments in child care and early child development programs. The spring, especially once Congress came out with their proposals in the spring and the summer, it was looking it wasn't looking good at all. In fact, there was a general feeling, at least on our end, since we worked at Capitol Hill for a long time, that we saw the threat of a year-long CR coming, and if that would happen, that'd be really bad for many critical domestic programs that support children. But in the end, given this current climate, it turned out we feel it worked out very well, and I think overall we're generally pleased, and we are looking forward. As President Obama enters his last year, and we are in the second session of this Congress, we look forward to continue to work to continue to try to increase not only access but increase funding for these programs. And when I speak of looking forward, I just want to spend a few moments to kind of give you a quick summary of how we think this year is gonna play out. Many of you probably did see the President's State of the Union last night, and unlike his previous State of the Unions, this is his last one. And usually, a two-term president and giving his last State of the Union, it's usually very light on details for new ideas. It was probably more of a reflection of his term in office, and as obviously President Obama laid out what he kind of, more of like a 5- and 10-year vision of where he would like to see the country to go. So he didn't really get into any specific proposals, although on February 9th he is publishing his final budget request to Congress. While he didn't discuss in any great detail child care and early child development last night, we are anticipating that he will again push for his massive increase in mandatory funding for the CCDF. And we can also share with all of you that we believe by the end of this month that in both the House and the Senate, we will finally have legislation introduced that would actually help put kind of a down payment on that President's $82 billion request. And so, obviously, we are anticipating that. We are going to work very, very closely with all of you and with members of Congress and administration on building support for this initiative. But we could tell you that it's probably, after the President's budget, it could at times be pretty quiet. This is an election year. And usually in a presidential election year, they will probably go through the motions, but there will probably be another budget resolution. House and the Senate will probably mark up their 12 appropriations bills. But chances are there could be some work done into the summer, but then probably not much of anything until after the election in November. So there will come September 30th probably be another short-term CR enacted until roughly December, and kind of depending on who the next president is, will determine how the fiscal year 2016 budget will be finalized. In all likelihood, it probably won't be finalized. It could be, but there's a very, very strong chance that President Obama last month signed his last budget into law. And just even hypothetically speaking, even if a Republican candidate wins, as a president-elect, they're going to communicate to Congress that we have our own priorities and we want to rework parts of this budget, just do a continuing resolution until the spring of 2017. Same goes even if a member of the Democratic Party wins. While that candidate or that president-elect may agree with President Obama on spending priorities, they may have priorities of their own, and they don't want to really spend their onboarding time and their transition time hammering out budget details, and so they probably would even call for a continuing resolution until the spring of 2017 as well. So, obviously we expect a lot of going on. We will continue to keep all of you updated and answer all of your questions. Once the president publishes his budget, I will, through our public policy blog on our website, I will provide all details regards to child care and early child development, and that's pretty much it. We just want to take this opportunity to summarize what happened last year. In short, it started off rough, but we thought we finished strong, and we are optimistic that we continue to build off this, even though we are entering the last year of administration of the Obama administration, and a new Congress will be here, obviously, this time next January. We think that over the years, we think the needs for child care and early child development have been resonating with members of Congress. You have even a lot of presidential candidates in both parties have been talking about the need to invest in child care. Obviously, some folks have different proposals on how to invest in it, but this issue, child care, is becoming an important issue nationally, and we find that very welcoming in our discussions. So I am going to, again, if any of you have have any questions, please type it in your chat box. And yes, we are recording this, and it will be on our website shortly. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Michelle. Do you want to have any thoughts?
Great. Thanks so much, Jay, and thank you all for carving out the time to join us this afternoon and hear a recap of all of the happenings in 2015 and working with us towards a very bright 2016 and a strong finish to this administration that focused so much on making quality, affordable child care a reality for working families as well as early education. So with that, as Jay said, we are looking at the questions that have been coming in. I think we've answered some of them about the actual slides and the webinar being posted to our website. If there's any other specific questions about the initiatives or about anything that was presented on this webinar today, please, we'll pause right now to give you an opportunity to chat them in. Okay, great question. Thank you, Norma, about advocacy efforts around the presidential election. There are several different national campaigns happening, and we look forward to making child care a priority in the presidential debate discussion this year. So I just wanted to pay attention to let you all know about a couple of different other national campaigns and organizations that we will be partnering with. One of them is the Center for American Progress, has a Within Reach campaign, and it's really a huge focus of their campaign is around making child care part of the discussion within the presidential election. We will be holding and hosting our own webinars similar to this one around election advocacy and activities that nonprofits and those that are not able to do direct advocacy or outreach for presidential races, but what you can do. So we'll definitely have some resources, materials, and webinars throughout 2016 to help support that type of work. And like I said before, working with the Center for American Progress and others that are really laser focused on making sure that child care and other issues affecting working families are a huge priority in this election year. So great question. The increase for budgets for childcare are great, but what would you say exactly will be the greatest tangible, observable benefits of the final appropriations bills? So I just wanted to put an exclamation mark around in tight budget times, the fact that the Child Care Development Fund got $2.8 billion more in this Omnibus Bill shows that both sides of the aisle really are prioritizing child care. So that alone is a very observable win. They also, in the same Congress also passed a bipartisan Child Care and Development Block Grant to increase quality, health, and safety in child care. And so building off of that, talking with members and ensuring that the CCDF and the resources needed for implementation are actually being given to states so they can have successful implementation is a huge win. Also, with the President's budget coming out in February, more to come on what proposals there are for child care. However, from past years and from what we expect, we're going to see a huge ask and a huge focus on increased spending towards child care. So more to come on that, but hopefully a lot of good things in store. Okay, well, Jay, it looks like you were that clear that all the questions have been answered, but of course, if there's anything else that comes up, feel free to email. I'll put our emails back up on the slides here. Email Jay or myself directly if you have questions around federal policy or any of the happenings in 2015 and in 2016 around child care and federal policy. So with that, have a great rest of your day. Again, thanks for joining us this afternoon and morning for some of you on the West Coast. And we look forward to our next call with you. Take care.